I am Belle, a 31-year-old surgical nurse in Boston who worked extra shifts for 3 years to afford my dream Lake Tahoe vacation. Despite moving away from my career, I always prioritized my family. When Mom called about Dad's urgent medical bills, I immediately wired $2,800 canceling my trip. But scrolling through social media a week later, I discovered the devastating truth that shattered my trust forever. Before I tell you how I discovered my family's betrayal, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt taken for granted by the people you love most. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Syracuse, New York, shaped much of who I am today. Our modest 2-story home with the perpetually leaking roof was where I learned about family loyalty, hard work, and sacrifice. These values were instilled in me primarily by my father, Robert, now 58, who dedicated his life to teaching high school science. Dad was respected by students and colleagues alike, but his teacher's salary often left us struggling to make ends meet, especially with 3 children to support. My mother, Diana, now 56, worked as a part-time bookkeeper at a local insurance office. She managed our family finances with meticulous precision, stretching every dollar to its breaking point. From an early age, I watched her juggle bills, cut coupons, and sometimes have hushed, worried conversations with Dad late at night about money. Those whispered concerns planted seeds of financial anxiety in me that would shape my decisions for decades. My older brother Adam is now 34 and works as a successful real estate agent in Syracuse. He always had a natural charm and business sense qualities that helped him build a thriving career selling luxury properties to wealthy clients. Despite his financial success, he remained deeply connected to our parents, living just 20 minutes away from our childhood home. His weekly Sunday dinners with Mom and Dad became a family tradition that I could only participate in through occasional FaceTime calls. Then there's my younger sister, Natalie, 28, a graphic designer who still lives with our parents. After graduating from community college, she set up a home office in our renovated basement, paying minimal rent while building her freelance business. Her constant presence in our parents' daily lives gave her an intimacy with them that distance denied me. Unlike my siblings, I left Syracuse in pursuit of education and opportunity. I earned an academic scholarship to nursing school, but still needed to work part-time at a coffee shop to cover living expenses. Those years were a blur of clinical rotations, late-night study sessions, and early morning shifts brewing coffee for half-awake customers. I graduated with honors and minimal student debt, a fact I took immense pride in. 5 years ago, I accepted a position at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, a move that advanced my career but stretched the geographical distance between my family and me to nearly 400 miles. Despite the physical separation, I maintained close ties through weekly phone calls, monthly care packages, and visits during major holidays. I made sure to send thoughtful birthday gifts, remember anniversaries, and keep up with the details of their lives. I also became the family's financial safety net. Whenever an emergency arose, I was the first person they called. When Adam's daughter needed money for a specialized summer camp, I contributed $500 to her fund. When Mom's car needed major repairs, I sent $700 without hesitation. When Dad's computer crashed before final grades were due, I overnight shipped him a new laptop. My nursing salary wasn't extravagant, but I lived frugally and saved diligently, always keeping a cushion for both my future and their emergencies. Over time, I noticed a subtle shift in family dynamics. My financial contributions were expected rather than appreciated. Thank yous became briefer, and follow-up calls about how they used my money became rarer. Still, I continued giving because that's what family does. Or at least, that's what I thought family did. I also began sensing a growing resentment from my siblings who had stayed close to home. Comments like, "Well, if Belle hadn't moved so far away," or "It would be nice if some people could help with more than just money," started punctuating family conversations. These barbs stung, but I rationalized them as the natural friction of different life choices. My parents never directly criticized my move to Boston, but their subtle favoritism toward my siblings who stayed local was evident in 1,000 small ways. They remembered Adam's work anecdotes in vivid detail but forgot the names of my colleagues. They attended every one of Natalie's local art exhibitions but couldn't make time to visit Boston when I received a Nursing Excellence Award. As the years passed, I found myself caught in an internal conflict. I loved my family deeply, but increasingly felt valued only for my financial stability and generosity. With each bank transfer, a small voice inside me questioned whether I was being supportive or simply being used. I silenced that voice repeatedly, telling myself that families support each other unconditionally. Last spring, after 5 years of dedicated service and exceptional performance reviews, I received a significant promotion to senior surgical nurse. The new position came with increased responsibility, but also a welcome salary bump. For the first time in my adult life, I decided it was time to prioritize my own dreams alongside my family obligations. That decision would ultimately lead to a painful but necessary awakening. Lake Tahoe wasn't a random vacation destination for me. It represented a 3-year dream, a personal promise I made during a particularly grueling night shift in the surgical department. A patient had just returned from Tahoe and showed me breathtaking photos of crystal-clear water against a backdrop of majestic mountains. During our pre-surgery conversation, he described the sense of peace and renewal he felt there. As I prepared him for an emergency appendectomy at 3 in the morning, I decided that someday I would experience that tranquility for myself. The dream became concrete when my 2 closest nursing colleagues, Jennifer and Ashley, mentioned wanting to plan a proper vacation instead of our usual weekend getaways. Jennifer, a pediatric nurse, with a passion for outdoor photography, immediately suggested Tahoe. Ashley, who worked in oncology and needed a break from the emotional toll of her department, enthusiastically agreed. We formed a pact that day, promising to make it happen within 3 years. Those 3 years were filled with intentional saving and meticulous planning. I picked up extra weekend shifts, volunteered for holiday coverage when the pay was higher, and tracked every expense in a detailed spreadsheet. I established a separate savings account specifically for this trip, watching with satisfaction as it grew from a few $100s to $5,000 through disciplined monthly contributions. This represented countless hours of additional work, missed social events, and simple meals eaten at home instead of restaurant outings. By the time our departure date approached, we had already paid non-refundable deposits, totaling $1,200 for a charming lakeside cabin with panoramic views. The property owner, a retired couple who had built the cabin themselves, even sent us a handwritten note expressing their excitement about hosting us. We had researched and booked adventure activities, including a guided hiking tour of the Emerald Bay Trail, water skiing lessons, and a sunset dinner cruise. Our itinerary was a perfect balance of adventure and relaxation. The countdown to our departure date became a daily ritual. I had a digital calendar on my phone that displayed the exact number of days, hours, and minutes until our flight. Watching those numbers decrease gave me a childlike excitement I hadn't felt in years. I purchased specialized gear for our outdoor adventures: hiking boots, a high-quality backpack, and a waterproof camera to capture memories without fear of water damage. My apartment gradually accumulated a collection of travel-sized toiletries, sunscreen, and insect repellent. Shopping for the perfect vacation wardrobe became a rare indulgence for someone usually dressed in scrubs. I spent an entire Saturday selecting lightweight hiking clothes, swimwear I felt confident in, and a special dress for our fancy dinner on our final night. Each purchase was carefully considered for both practicality and the joy it would bring during our long-awaited adventure. Our group chat became increasingly active as the trip approached. We shared articles about hidden gems at Lake Tahoe, debated which restaurants to try, and coordinated our packing lists to avoid unnecessary duplication. Jennifer sent daily photos of Tahoe landmarks with captions like, "7 days until we see this in person." Ashley researched the best spots for stargazing and created a playlist of relaxing music for evenings on the cabin's deck. This wasn't just another vacation. It represented my first real break in 5 years of demanding surgical nursing. In my profession, patients' lives literally depend on my focus, expertise, and stamina. Operating rooms are high-pressure environments where mistakes can have catastrophic consequences. I had spent years absorbing the stress of emergency surgeries, comforting families through their worst moments, and maintaining calm professionalism despite physical and emotional exhaustion. The mental health toll of my work had begun showing in subtle ways. I caught myself staring blankly at my reflection some mornings, momentarily unrecognizable to myself. I occasionally snapped at friends over minor frustrations, then felt overwhelming guilt afterward. Sleep became fragmented and insufficient, with surgical scenarios replaying in my dreams. These were classic symptoms of burnout in healthcare professionals, a condition I was trained to recognize in others but struggled to acknowledge in myself. My colleagues noticed before I fully admitted it. Jennifer gently pointed out that I hadn't used my allotted vacation days in 18 months. Ashley observed that I rarely talked about anything outside of work anymore. Even my supervisor, Dr. Marshall, pulled me aside after witnessing me tear up over a scheduling miscommunication, something completely out of character for my usually composed demeanor. "Belle," he said, with genuine concern, "even the most dedicated nurses need to refill their wells. You can't keep giving from an empty cup." That conversation was another catalyst for committing fully to the Tahoe plan. This trip wasn't merely tourism, it was a necessary reset for my well-being. The hospital psychologist had often emphasized that healthcare workers need regular periods of complete detachment from medical environments to maintain perspective and compassion. Tahoe would be my chance to remember who I was beyond my scrubs and stethoscope. As our departure date grew closer, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. My colleagues commented on my brighter mood and more frequent smiling. For once, I was putting myself first, investing in my own joy and restoration. The anticipation alone was therapeutic proof that I had something wonderful waiting on the horizon. Little did I know that my family would soon test just how committed I was to this act of self-care, and just how easily I could be pulled back into familiar patterns of sacrifice. The call came at 11:15 on a Tuesday night, just 8 days before our scheduled departure for Lake Tahoe. I had just finished a 14-hour shift assisting with a complex spinal surgery, and was finally settling into bed when my phone illuminated with my mother's name. Late-night calls from family typically signal emergencies, so adrenaline instantly cleared my exhaustion. "Mom, is everything okay?" I answered, already sitting upright and mentally preparing for bad news. Her voice came through trembling and punctuated by what sounded like muffled sobs. "Belle, honey, I hate to call so late, but we have a situation with your father." My medical training immediately kicked in. "What's happening? Does he need to go to the emergency room?" No, he's home," she clarified. "But we got his test results today from Dr. Williams. He has some heart abnormalities they need to investigate further. The insurance is covering the basic tests, but the specialist requires payment up front." The tension in my shoulders eased slightly upon learning it wasn't an immediate medical crisis, but concern for my father remained. What kind of heart abnormalities? What did the EKG show? My mother became vague, mentioning something about irregular rhythms and potential valve issues. While her explanation lacked medical precision, the emotion in her voice seemed genuine. "The specialist wants to do the additional testing this week, but the out-of-pocket cost is $2,800. Our credit cards are maxed out from fixing the roof last month." That specific amount, $2,800, caused my stomach to tighten. It represented more than half of my carefully saved Tahoe fund. "We wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate, Belle," my mother continued, her voice breaking. "Your father is stubborn and doesn't want me calling you, but I'm scared. You know heart problems took your grandfather at 63. I can't lose Robert." The mention of my grandfather's premature death from cardiac arrest hit its intended mark. Fear for my father's health immediately overshadowed any hesitation about the money. I found myself promising to transfer the funds the next morning. After hanging up, I stared at the ceiling for hours, my mind racing between concern for my father and the implications for my vacation. I texted Jennifer asking if we could talk tomorrow about a difficult decision I might have to make. Then I researched cancellation policies for our Tahoe reservations until exhaustion finally pulled me into restless sleep. Jennifer and Ashley met me for coffee before our shifts the next morning, their faces showing immediate concern when they saw my expression. "Dad needs cardiac testing that insurance won't cover," I explained, stirring my untouched latte. $2,800, and they need it this week. Both friends expressed genuine concern for my father, but Jennifer gently asked the question I had been avoiding. "What does this mean for Tahoe?" I took a deep breath. "I think I need to cancel my portion of the trip. You two should still go. The cabin's paid for, and you can split my share of the activities." "We could postpone until you save up again," Ashley suggested. "Maybe in a few months." "The cancellation penalties would be substantial now," I countered. "And we've all arranged time off that might not align again for months." Plus, you both need this break as much as I do. The disappointment in their eyes mirrored my own heartbreak, but they responded with understanding and support. Before parting for our respective departments, Jennifer hugged me tightly. Your dad's health comes first. There will be other trips. That afternoon, I visited my bank and transferred $2,800 to my parents' account. I sent a text informing my mother the money had been sent and asking about my father's appointment schedule so I could call between his tests. Her response was brief. Thanks, honey. Your father appreciates it. No mention of repayment. No detailed update on his condition. No acknowledgement of what this might cost me beyond the dollars. I tried calling my father directly that evening, but our conversation was oddly short. He seemed uncomfortable discussing his health concerns and quickly passed the phone back to my mother. When I specifically asked about the specialist's appointment, he mumbled something about later this week without giving a specific day. At the time, I attributed his vagueness to typical male reluctance to discuss health problems. The next day, I formally canceled my portion of the Lake Tahoe trip, absorbing the full cancellation penalties rather than asking my friends to cover any portion. Between the lost deposits cancellation fees and non-refundable airfare, I forfeited nearly $800 beyond the money I had sent my parents. With a heavy heart, I returned the new hiking boots and vacation clothes, receiving store credit rather than cash refunds. I informed my supervisor that I would be available to work during my previously approved vacation time, an announcement he met with visible concern. Belle, you need this break, Dr. Marshall insisted. Can you postpone rather than cancel entirely? Family emergency, I explained with a forced smile. Dad needs some cardiac tests. The trip will have to wait. My colleagues rallied around me with supportive gestures. Jennifer promised to take photos of Tahoe for my future trip planning. Ashley left a gift card for my favorite coffee shop with a note saying, "For your next adventure fund." Others offered to trade shifts so I could at least have a long weekend to myself. I volunteered for the most demanding surgical rotation during what would have been my vacation week, figuring the intensity would distract me from disappointment. Between cases, I texted my mother for updates on Dad's tests, but received only cursory responses. Everything's proceeding, and doctor seems thorough, offered little concrete information but didn't immediately trigger suspicion. As I watched Jennifer and Ashley depart for their trip with excited waves and promises to call, I worked hard to suppress my envy. I repeatedly told myself that family comes first, that my father's health was infinitely more important than a vacation. I reminded myself that nursing had taught me that time off can be rescheduled, but health crises require immediate attention. The weekend that marked what should have been the beginning of my Lake Tahoe adventure found me alone in my apartment, catching up on laundry and meal prepping for another week of long shifts. I avoided social media, knowing that Jennifer and Ashley would be posting photos of azure waters and mountain vistas that would only intensify my sense of loss. Instead, I focused on the satisfaction of having helped my parents through a difficult time. I told myself that sacrifice was its own reward, that being reliable in crisis was more important than personal disappointment. These rationalizations carried me through the lonely weekend and into the work week that should have been filled with adventure and restoration. I had no idea that my sacrifice was about to be revealed as unnecessary at best and a manipulative extraction at worst. The revelation came 5 days into what should have been my Lake Tahoe vacation. After a particularly exhausting 12-hour shift assisting with back-to-back trauma surgeries, I collapsed onto my couch with a microwave dinner and mindlessly opened Facebook. I had been avoiding social media specifically to escape vacation envy, but that evening I'd craved some superficial connection to the outside world. The first post on my feed stopped my fork midway to my mouth. My cousin Taylor, usually careful about family discretion, had tagged my mother in a photo with the caption, "Cruise Day 3. Caribbean sunset with the family." The image showed my parents, brother, sister, and various extended family members holding tropical drinks on a cruise ship deck, backdropped by a spectacular orange sunset over turquoise waters. My mother wore a new sundress I had never seen, and my father, supposedly in need of cardiac testing, beamed with robust health as he wrapped his arm around my sister's shoulders. I blinked repeatedly, certain I was misinterpreting what I was seeing. Perhaps this was an old photo, a memory from a previous family vacation that Taylor had posted for nostalgia. but the date stamp showed it had been uploaded just 4 hours earlier, and my mother's comment below it, "Best family vacation ever," was timestamped just 30 minutes ago. My hands trembling, I began searching through other family members' recent posts. Adam had set his privacy settings higher, but his wife had shared a series of photos showing their children enjoying the cruise ship's water slides and mini golf course. The ship's name, Caribbean Princess, was clearly visible on life preservers in the background. With growing nausea, I opened a new browser tab and searched for Caribbean Princess cruise packages. The family suites for 2 adults and 3 children started at approximately $6,000, not including excursions, drink packages, or airfare to the departure port in Miami. Further digging revealed that this particular cruise had been scheduled months ago. My sister had liked the cruise line's Facebook page 8 weeks earlier. My brother had checked in at Miami International Airport 6 days ago, with the caption, "Family Adventure Begins." The timing aligned perfectly with my parents' request for money. They had asked for $2,800 just as they needed to make final payments for their family cruise. A cruise that apparently included every family member except me. As this reality settled in my consciousness, more evidence appeared. Taylor, apparently oblivious to the situation, continued posting group photos from various cruise activities. One showed my entire family dressed formally for the captain's dinner. Another captured them on a beach excursion in St. Thomas. In each image, they looked relaxed, joyful, and completely unburdened by any health concerns. Most damning was a casual comment my father left on one of the photos, "Best decision we made all year, worth every penny." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me as I struggled to process this betrayal. The medical emergency that had caused me to sacrifice my own long-planned vacation was entirely fabricated. The money I had sent, money earned through countless extra shifts and personal sacrifices, had helped fund a luxury family vacation from which I had been deliberately excluded. Without fully registering my actions, I found myself calling my mother's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail, likely because she was at sea. I then tried my brother's number with the same result. Only my sister, who must have purchased an international phone package, answered on the third attempt. "Hello," she sounded distracted ambient noise, suggesting a crowded location. "Natalie, I just saw Taylor's photos," I said, my voice eerily calm despite the storm raging inside me. "You're all on a cruise." A long pause followed, then, "Oh. Yeah, it was kind of a last-minute opportunity. Mom and Dad got a deal they couldn't pass up." "Last minute. The photos show you've been planning this for months. And coincidentally, the amount I sent for Dad's supposed heart tests is about half the cost of your cruise package." Another pause. "Belle, it's not what you think. You should talk to Mom and Dad when we get back." "Dad doesn't have heart problems requiring tests, does he?" My medical training suddenly highlighted the inconsistencies in their story. The vague symptoms, the unspecified specialist, the reluctance to provide appointment details. "He had some chest pain a while ago, but it turned out to be acid reflux," she admitted. "Look, I need to go. We're about to start an activity. We'll explain everything when we get home." The call ended, but my phone immediately rang again. It was my father, his voice competing with festive background music. "Belle, your sister said you called. Listen, an opportunity came up for this cruise, and we were going to tell you eventually. Your money helped make it possible for everyone to go." "Why wasn't I invited?" I asked, the simple question hanging between us. "You're so busy with your important Boston career," he replied, an unfamiliar bitterness edging his voice. "We figured you wouldn't be able to take the time off anyway. Plus, you know you live so far away now." Before I could respond, my brother apparently took the phone. "Belle, stop making this a big deal. You chose your career over family years ago. You can't expect to be included in everything just because you send money occasionally." My mother's voice came next, her tone defensive rather than apologetic. "Honey, you make so much more than the rest of us with your big city hospital salary. We knew you could afford to help. We were going to pay you back eventually." Each justification felt like a fresh slap. The implication that I had chosen career over family ignored the fact that I had maintained close contact despite the distance. The dismissal of my financial contributions as occasional erased years of regular support. The assumption about my big city salary revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of the cost of living in Boston compared to Syracuse. As the call continued, with each family member taking turns defending their actions, a horrifying clarity emerged. They had deliberately excluded me from the family vacation, yet felt entitled to my financial contribution toward it. They had fabricated a medical emergency exploiting my concern for my father and my medical background. They had calculated that I would send money without question if health was involved. After ending the call, I spent hours reviewing past emergencies that had prompted my financial assistance. The timing of several coincided with large purchases my parents or siblings had made shortly afterward. My brother's request for help with his daughter's dental work preceded his new boat purchase by 3 weeks. My mother's car repair crisis resolved just before she debuted an extensive kitchen renovation. Social media provided a damning timeline I had never noticed before, perhaps because I had never had reason to look for it. Major expenditures consistently followed my financial help with various crises. Further investigation revealed a family group chat in which I was not included. Screenshots accidentally visible in the background of one of Taylor's photos showed messages coordinating cruise plans dating back 3 months. My name appeared in one partially visible message Belle doesn't need to know until after. The remainder was cut off, but the implication was clear. My exclusion was deliberate, premeditated, and accepted by every member of my immediate family. That night alone in my apartment with this new reality, I experienced a complete emotional breakdown. I sobbed until no tears remained, then sat in silent shock as the foundation of my family identity crumbled around me. The people I had sacrificed for repeatedly saw me not as a beloved daughter and sister, but as a financial resource to be tapped when convenient. The betrayal was total, and in that devastating clarity, I knew something fundamental had to change. Sleep eluded me entirely that night. I alternated between periods of numb stillness and bursts of frantic activity, pacing my apartment, re-examining photos and messages, and occasionally succumbing to fresh waves of tears. By morning, my eyes were swollen, my throat raw, and my mind exhausted yet hyperactive with racing thoughts. For the first time in my professional life, I called in sick without physical illness. My supervisor, Dr. Marshall, must have heard something concerning in my voice because he didn't ask for details. "Take care of yourself, Belle. We've got coverage." His simple kindness nearly triggered another breakdown. Once I had secured the day off, I called Jennifer, who answered despite the early hour in Lake Tahoe. Her excited greeting about the sunrise over the mountains quickly shifted to concern when I failed to respond normally. "Belle, what's wrong? Is it your dad?" The question unleashed everything. Words tumbled out in a disjointed narrative as I explained the discovery, the cruise, the deliberate deception, and the casual justifications my family had offered. Jennifer listened without interruption, occasionally making soft sounds of disbelief and outrage on my behalf. "That's not family," she finally said when I paused for breath. "That's exploitation. I'm so sorry, Belle. What they did is unforgivable." Her validation provided the first moment of relief I'd felt since the discovery. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't being selfish or unreasonable. The betrayal was real and significant. With Jennifer's encouragement, I contacted my therapist, Dr. Lisa Abramson, whom I had been seeing sporadically to manage work-related stress. She agreed to an emergency virtual session that afternoon, rearranging her schedule to accommodate my crisis. During those 3 hours between scheduling and attending therapy, I began methodically documenting the pattern of financial requests from my family. Creating this evidence file was partly practical, a way to understand the scope of what had happened, but also therapeutic, channeling my emotional chaos into ordered information. Over the past 5 years, I had sent my parents approximately $17,000 for various emergencies. My brother had received nearly $4,000 in temporary loans that were never repaid. My sister had benefited from approximately $3,500 in direct assistance, plus countless gifts I had classified as generosity rather than support. When Dr. Abramson's face appeared on my laptop screen, she immediately noticed my physical state. "Belle, have you slept or eaten today?" I admitted I had done neither, and she gently insisted I get water and something simple to eat before we continued. This basic self-care directive highlighted how completely the discovery had derailed my normal functioning. Once I had complied, we began exploring what had happened. Dr. Abramson listened attentively, as I detailed both the recent deception and the pattern it had revealed. What you're describing is a family system that has come to view you primarily as a resource, she explained. This didn't happen overnight. It developed gradually as they learned you would respond reliably to crisis narratives. But why exclude me entirely? I asked the question that had haunted me most persistently. They could have invited me. I might have contributed financially anyway. That would have required them to see you as a full family member with equal value and inclusion rights, she replied. Instead, they've compartmentalized you as the distant provider separate from the core family experience. That framing struck me with painful accuracy. I had become a utility rather than a person in my family's eyes. My value was measured in dollars rather than presence. Over the next hour, we identified stages of grief I would likely experience. The shock and denial had largely passed, giving way to intense anger and betrayal. Bargaining might follow with attempts to rationalize their behavior or negotiate new family terms. Depression would likely come later, as the full implications of this relationship breakdown became clear. Acceptance doesn't mean approving what they did, Dr. Abramson emphasized. It means recognizing the reality of who they've shown themselves to be and adjusting your expectations and boundaries accordingly. In the days that followed, I experienced the predicted emotional progression with textbook precision. My anger manifested physically, loss of appetite, sleep disturbances, and occasional panic responses when my phone displayed family numbers. I developed a persistent knot in my stomach and tension headaches that no amount of ibuprofen could touch. Returning to work provided temporary distraction, but also new challenges. My focus wavered during routine tasks. During a standard post-operative assessment, I caught myself staring blankly at the monitor while a patient asked me a question I completely missed. In the surgical suite, an instrument slipped from my usually steady hands, causing a senior surgeon to ask if I was feeling all right. During a quiet moment in the recovery room, my supervisor pulled me aside. "Belle, something's going on with you. I've never seen you this distracted." The concern in his eyes broke through my professional facade, and I found myself confessing a simplified version of the situation. Family betrayal, I summarized. I discovered they were using me financially, while deliberately excluding me emotionally. Dr. Marshall's response surprised me with its personal nature. My brother did something similar years ago, used my mother's cancer as an excuse to get money from relatives when she was actually in remission. Some people see family ties as opportunities for manipulation rather than connections to nurture. His understanding provided another anchor during the emotional storm. So did the small kindnesses from colleagues who noticed my distress without knowing its cause. The charge nurse adjusted schedules to pair me with less demanding cases. The break room mysteriously contained my favorite tea for several days running. Ashley, back from Tahoe, left sticky notes with simple encouragements on my locker. Through it all, I continued sessions with Dr. Abramson, who helped me understand that my identity had been partially built around being the responsible one, the successful one, and the family supporter. With those roles now revealed as exploitation rather than genuine connection, I needed to reconsider my self-definition. "Your value isn't in what you provide," she reminded me repeatedly. "It's inherent in who you are." Gradually, I began reconnecting with the parts of myself that existed completely separate from family roles. The Belle who loved early morning runs along the Charles River. The Belle who could lose herself for hours in historical fiction. The Belle whose quick humor made difficult surgeries more bearable for everyone in the operating room. I started journaling extensively, documenting not just the betrayal, but my emotional responses to it. Through this process, I noticed patterns in my own behavior that had enabled the exploitation, my need for approval, my difficulty saying no, my tendency to overfunction when others underfunctioned, my belief that love required sacrifice. Research became another coping mechanism. I read books about family systems, emotional manipulation, and boundary setting. I joined an online support group for adults dealing with family estrangement. The stories I encountered there helped normalize my experience and provided models for different resolution approaches. As the initial shock and anger began to subside, earlier memories surfaced with new clarity. The time my parents forgot to call on my nursing school graduation day because they were celebrating my brother's new house. The Christmas, when my carefully selected gifts for everyone sat unopened while the family exclaimed over the presents they had exchanged with each other. the family photos from gatherings scheduled when they knew my hospital rotation would prevent my attendance. What I had previously dismissed as unfortunate timing or simple thoughtlessness now revealed a consistent pattern of exclusion and devaluation. The cruise was not an aberration, but the most blatant expression of an established family dynamic. 6 weeks after discovering the truth, I found myself sitting in my apartment surrounded by years of family photos. I noticed something revealing in every image from the past decade. In group pictures, I was always positioned at the edge, easily cropped out. In candid shots, I was often caught looking toward family members who were engaged with each other rather than with me. The visual evidence confirmed what my heart now knew: I had been physically present but emotionally peripheral for years. That realization brought not more pain, but a strange sense of freedom. The problem wasn't something I could fix through greater effort, more generosity, or better communication. The dynamic was entrenched and embraced by every family member. Accepting this truth opened the door to prioritizing my own well-being without guilt for the first time in my adult life. In that moment of clarity, I knew what I needed to do. Not in anger, not in retaliation, but as an act of necessary self-preservation and long overdue self-respect. My decision to withdraw from my family's life wasn't made impulsively or in the heat of anger. It emerged gradually over the weeks following the cruise revelation, a conclusion reached after careful consideration of all available evidence and options. This would not be a dramatic exit with ultimatums and accusations, but a strategic, quiet recalibration of boundaries that would protect my emotional and financial well-being. The first step was securing my finances against further exploitation. I consulted with Marguerite Chen, a financial advisor recommended by a colleague, bringing my documentation of previous family emergencies and my concerns about future requests. Based on what you've described, I suggest creating what I call a firewall between your finances and family access, Marguerite advised. This includes changing account numbers, removing automatic transfers, and establishing new protocols for any future financial assistance. Following her guidance, I opened accounts at a different bank, transferred my savings and checking balances, and closed the accounts my family knew about. I canceled the automatic monthly transfer I had set up years ago to my parents' account, a small but consistent supplement to their income they had come to treat as an entitlement. I also reviewed all my emergency contacts and legal documents. My parents were listed as my medical proxies, emergency contacts at work, and beneficiaries on my life insurance policy. I updated these, systematically replacing their names with Jennifer and Ashley friends who had demonstrated genuine care for my well-being. The practical aspects of separation were straightforward compared to the emotional and logistical complexities of redefining contact. I had no interest in a confrontational cutting of ties that would only create drama and potential for reconciliation pressure from extended family. Instead, I opted for a gradual fading from availability. My first step was moving to a new apartment across town when my lease expired. I had been considering a move anyway to reduce my commute, but now the change of address served an additional purpose. I deliberately chose not to file a forwarding address with the Postal Service, ensuring that any mail sent to my old address would be returned rather than followed to my new home. Next came the digital separation. I changed my personal cell phone number, email address, and all social media contact information. I didn't block my family members or delete accounts where they could see my previous activity, as such obvious actions would trigger immediate questions. Instead, I simply became inactive on those platforms while establishing new private accounts under slight variations of my name for continued contact with non-family friends. For professional purposes, I maintained my work, email, and office phone, but instructed our administrative staff to screen calls and take messages rather than connecting family members directly. I'm dealing with some personal boundaries, I explained to our sympathetic office manager. I need to manage when and how certain people can reach me. These changes were implemented gradually over 6 weeks, creating an increasing buffer between my daily life and family access. I didn't announce any of these changes. I simply became progressively more difficult to reach through established channels. As expected, my family's response evolved as their normal methods of contact failed. My mother's text to my old number went from casual check-ins to increasingly concerned questions to thinly veiled accusations of selfishness for not responding. My father, less technologically inclined, tried calling my old number repeatedly, leaving voicemails that ranged from confused to frustrated. My brother took a more aggressive approach. When he couldn't reach me directly, he called the hospital's main line, attempting to be connected to me. When that failed, he sent strongly worded emails to my work address, demanding explanation for my childish disappearing act and insisting I was tearing the family apart over a simple misunderstanding. My sister's response was more passive-aggressive. She posted vague but pointed social media comments about people who create drama by withdrawing and family members who think they're too good for the rest of us. Without naming me directly, she made it clear to our mutual acquaintances that I was the subject of her disapproval. The most unexpected reaction came from my mother as the weeks of limited contact stretched into months. She began reporting worrying symptoms and potential health crises in the few email messages that reached my new account. Concerning test results and doctor wants to rule out serious conditions featured prominently, echoing the exact strategy that had previously succeeded in extracting money for the cruise. Recognizing the manipulation attempt helped me maintain my boundaries. I responded with brief, compassionate, but non-committal messages. I hope everything turns out well. Medical uncertainty is always difficult. No offers of money, no promises to call, no engagement beyond basic acknowledgement. My Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, and the family member I had always felt most connected to, reached out through LinkedIn, one platform I had maintained for professional reasons. Her message expressed genuine concern without judgment. Belle, whatever has happened between you and my sister's family, I want you to know I'm here if you need support. No pressure to explain anything. Her message provided an opportunity to maintain a connection to extended family while establishing clear terms. I met her for coffee during her business trip to Boston, explaining the cruise situation and the pattern it had revealed without bitterness or accusation, simply as facts that had necessitated my withdrawal. I'm not surprised, she admitted. Diana and Robert have always been financially irresponsible, and they've talked about your doctor money for years, as if it were partly theirs by right. I just never knew they'd go so far as to exclude you while taking your contribution. Her validation was healing, as was her respect for my boundaries. What do you need from the wider family? Should I keep your new contact information private? Yes, please, I confirmed. I'm not cutting ties permanently, just creating space to recalibrate the relationship on healthier terms. I don't want flying monkeys sent to pressure me into resuming the old dynamic. She smiled at the reference. No flying monkeys from me, just occasional check-ins if that's welcome. With Aunt Susan established as my sole family contact, I navigated my first holiday season alone with both trepidation and relief. Thanksgiving had always involved a trip to Syracuse and elaborate family traditions. This year, I accepted Jennifer's invitation to join her family's celebration instead. The contrast was illuminating. Jennifer's parents expressed genuine interest in my work, asked thoughtful follow-up questions, and never once made me feel that my value was connected to what I could provide. Her brother joked with me like a longtime friend, including me naturally in family discussions. By evening, I realized I had never once checked my phone or felt the anxious need to perform or please that characterized my biological family gatherings. Christmas presented different challenges. Rather than accepting another friend's invitation and potentially feeling like a charity case, I decided to create my own meaningful tradition. I volunteered for the Christmas shift at the hospital, providing care for patients whose medical needs didn't pause for holidays. Afterward, I treated myself to a reservation at an upscale restaurant serving special holiday menus, enjoying the luxury of a beautiful meal without family tension. Throughout this period of separation, therapy remained my anchor. Dr. Abramson helped me process the guilt trips delivered through various channels and recognize the manipulation tactics for what they were. Notice how they're focusing entirely on your withdrawal as the problem, she pointed out. There's no acknowledgement of the behavior that prompted it, no genuine apology for the cruise deception. As the 6-month mark of my strategic withdrawal approached, I noticed significant improvements in multiple areas of my life. The constant background anxiety of waiting for the next financial emergency request had dissipated. My sleep had improved substantially. My focus at work had sharpened again, earning positive comments from supervisors who had noticed my previous distraction. Most significantly, I had developed financial peace of mind for the first time in my adult life. Without the constant drain of family support, my savings had accumulated at an unprecedented rate. I established a proper emergency fund, increased my retirement contributions, and even began researching investment opportunities previously beyond my reach. My social connections deepened as I invested more authentically in friendships. Without the emotional drain of managing family dynamics, I had more energy for nurturing mutually supportive relationships. I joined a weekend hiking group, reigniting my love for outdoor activities. I volunteered monthly at a medical clinic serving uninsured patients, finding purpose in using my skills for genuine need rather than enabling dysfunction. As I built this healthier life, occasional updates filtered through Aunt Susan about my immediate family. My parents had faced actual financial consequences from my withdrawal, forcing them to finally address their spending habits. My brother had taken out a proper bank loan for his daughter's college fund rather than relying on my contributions. My sister had moved into her own apartment, taking responsibility for her expenses for the first time at 30. These changes suggested that my absence was creating necessary growth opportunities for my family, validating my decision to withdraw rather than continue enabling their dependency. Perhaps in time, this growth might create the foundation for a healthier relationship. But for now, the quiet absence of toxicity in my daily life was its own reward. One particularly significant evening, 6 months into my strategic withdrawal, I received a small package from Aunt Susan. Inside was a simple keychain with a miniature Lake Tahoe pendant and a note for your next adventure taken on your own terms. That night, I opened my laptop and booked a solo trip to Lake Tahoe for the following month, a symbolic reclamation of the dream that had been sacrificed to family manipulation. As I confirmed the reservation for a lakeside cabin similar to the one I had missed, I realized I was no longer simply withdrawing from an unhealthy system. I was advancing confidently into a life governed by my own values and boundaries. The quiet vanishing had transformed from an escape strategy into a pathway toward authentic living. And in that transformation, I found an unexpected sense of gratitude for the painful revelation that had made it necessary. 1 year after discovering the cruise deception, I stood on the shores of Lake Tahoe, watching the setting sun paint the water in shades of gold and rose. The pristine beauty was exactly as I had imagined during those years of planning and saving, yet my experience of it was profoundly different than it would have been before my family's betrayal forced me to redraw the boundaries of my life. The intervening months had been transformative. Weekly therapy with Dr. Abramson had helped me identify and address my people-pleasing tendencies, particularly my pattern of equating self-sacrifice with worthiness of love. Through guided exercises and consistent reflection, I had begun distinguishing between genuine generosity and the compulsive caregiving that had characterized my family relationships. Notice how different it feels to give from abundance rather than obligation. Dr. Abramson had encouraged during a recent session. True generosity leaves you feeling expanded, not depleted. This new understanding had informed all my relationships, including my reconnection with Jennifer and Ashley. 3 months after my strategic withdrawal began, I had finally fulfilled my promise to join them at Lake Tahoe, booking my own trip that coincided with their return visit. Standing together by the lake, sharing stories of our separate journeys to this moment, created a new foundation for our friendship based on authentic sharing rather than just shared work experiences. My relationship with extended family had also evolved in unexpected ways. Aunt Susan had become a genuine friend and ally, maintaining appropriate boundaries while providing occasional family updates that helped me gauge whether reconnection might someday be possible. During a thoughtful coffee conversation in early spring, she revealed more context about my parents' financial history. "Your parents have been financially irresponsible since before you were born," she explained. "They declared bankruptcy when you were too young to remember, then again when you were in high school. Each time family bailed them out, which only reinforced their pattern. When you became successful, you unknowingly stepped into the family enabler role." This information helped me understand that the cruise incident wasn't an aberration, but the culmination of lifelong patterns. My parents had never developed financial accountability because they had always been rescued first by their parents, then by me. My withdrawal, while painful for everyone involved, had finally forced them to face consequences for their choices. According to Aunt Susan, those consequences had initially created crisis but ultimately sparked change. My parents had enrolled in financial counseling through their church. My father had taken on tutoring work to supplement his teaching income. My mother had increased her bookkeeping hours and stopped using credit cards entirely. For the first time in decades, they were living within their actual means rather than the inflated lifestyle supported by my contributions. My siblings had similarly experienced growth through necessity. My brother, accustomed to tapping my resources when his commissions were low, had developed more consistent work habits and more careful financial planning. My sister had finally launched her graphic design business, properly securing regular clients rather than relying on sporadic projects supplemented by my support. This information provided validation but not immediate reconciliation. I maintained my distance, observing these changes from afar through Aunt Susan's occasional updates. I needed to see sustained change, not temporary crisis response, before considering any form of reconnection. That opportunity came unexpectedly 9 months into my withdrawal. Aunt Susan called to inform me that my father had been hospitalized with actual cardiac issues, a minor heart attack that required stent placement. Unlike the fabricated medical crisis that had funded the cruise, this situation was documented by hospital records she personally verified before contacting me. "I know what they did before, so I checked the facts myself," she assured me. "This is real, Belle. And while you absolutely do not owe them your presence, I thought you should have the information to make your own choice." After careful consideration and consultation with Dr. Abramson, I decided to send flowers to the hospital with a simple card expressing wishes for recovery. No money, no promises of visits, just a basic human acknowledgement of a serious situation. My mother called my work number the day the flowers arrived, leaving a voicemail that struck a notably different tone than her previous attempts at contact. "Belle, thank you for the beautiful arrangement. Your father was deeply moved. We understand why you've stepped back from the family, and we respect your decision. If you ever want to talk, we're ready to listen, not just speak. No pressure, no expectations." The absence of manipulation, guilt-tripping, or financial requests represented a significant shift from previous communications. After discussing it with Dr. Abramson, I responded with a brief email acknowledging her message and expressing hope for my father's recovery. I closed with, "I need time and evidence of sustained change," before considering rebuilding our relationship. My mother's response was equally measured. "We understand. We'll be here when or if you're ready." This exchange opened the door to extremely limited communication. Over the following months, I permitted brief scheduled phone calls that I could end if they veered into manipulation. I allowed monthly email updates that I could read when emotionally prepared. Through these controlled interactions, I began assessing whether genuine change was occurring or whether this was simply a new strategy to regain access to my financial support. The first tentative family gathering I attended was my niece's high school graduation 11 months after my withdrawal began. I set clear boundaries in advance. I would attend the ceremony and brief reception, bring an appropriate gift for my niece but would stay in a hotel rather than with family, maintain my own transportation, and leave if boundaries were violated. To my surprise and relief, my family respected these terms completely. My mother hugged me briefly when I arrived, but didn't press for more intimacy than I offered. My father expressed genuine pleasure at my presence without manipulation. My brother acknowledged the awkwardness directly. "We have a lot to rebuild if you're willing. No pressure today, though. This is about Emma's accomplishment." The atmosphere was distinctly different from previous family gatherings. The absence of subtle digs, guilt trips, and financial discussions was notable. My sister, initially stiff and defensive, gradually relaxed when she realized I wasn't there to confront or accuse, just to celebrate our niece's milestone appropriately. Most revealing was their reaction to my graduation gift for Emma, a modest but thoughtful book collection related to her planned college major. In the past, family members would have immediately assessed and compared gift values, making pointed comments about relative generosity. This time, the focus remained on Emma's response to the gift's thoughtfulness rather than its monetary value. This experience provided cautious hope that genuine change might be possible, not just temporary behavior modification designed to regain access to my resources. Still, I maintained firm boundaries as we began the slow process of redefining our relationships. When my parents suggested a monthly family dinner, I counteroffered with quarterly gatherings in public restaurants where everyone paid their own way. When my brother asked for advice about his son's college applications, I provided information and guidance, but no financial commitments. When my sister shared her business challenges, I offered strategic suggestions rather than monetary solutions. Through these interactions, a new family dynamic gradually emerged. Conversations became more authentic without the undercurrent of financial expectation. Relationships developed new dimensions as we connected through shared interests and experiences rather than obligation and dependency. The most significant breakthrough came during a private conversation with my father 13 months after the cruise discovery. Over coffee at a neutral location, he offered what felt like his first completely honest communication in our adult relationship. "I failed you as a father," he acknowledged without prompting. "I taught you to sacrifice for family, but never taught you that sacrifice should be reciprocal. I took advantage of your generosity because it was easier than changing my own habits. Your withdrawal was the wake-up call I needed but never wanted." His words carried the weight of genuine reflection rather than strategic appeasement. We talked for 3 hours that afternoon, addressing patterns and dynamics that had gone unnamed for decades. While one conversation couldn't heal years of imbalance, it established a foundation of honesty upon which a healthier relationship might eventually be built. Similar conversations occurred individually with my mother and siblings over subsequent months. Some were productive, others difficult and inconclusive. The process wasn't linear or always forward-moving, but it was consistently more authentic than our previous interactions had been. Alongside this family reconstruction work, I continued building a fulfilling independent life. I developed close friendships with people who respected boundaries and valued reciprocity. I advanced in my nursing career, accepting a leadership position that utilized both my clinical expertise and the assertiveness skills I had developed through my family experience. I even began a promising relationship with Daniel, an architect I met through my hiking group, who demonstrated healthy family dynamics in his own life. His attentiveness to my boundaries and his natural reciprocity in giving and receiving support provided a healing counterpoint to my family history. Now, standing by Lake Tahoe's shore on the anniversary of my discovered betrayal, I could appreciate how that painful revelation had ultimately freed me from patterns that would have continued indefinitely without intervention. The water before me symbolized both the catalyst for my awakening and the tranquility I had finally achieved. I no longer defined family solely by biology or obligation. My circle now included people connected by mutual respect and reciprocal care. Jennifer and Ashley, whose friendship had never wavered. Aunt Susan, whose honesty had bridged family divides. Colleagues who had supported me through crisis without judgment. And yes, to varying degrees, my biological family members, as they demonstrated capacity for healthier relationships. The hardest lesson I had learned was that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to quietly disappear until they learn to see you as a person, not a resource. True healing begins when you value yourself enough to walk away from those who do not. My strategic withdrawal had not been an ending, but a beginning, the first step toward authentic relationships based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. That realization brought not more pain, but a strange sense of freedom. The problem wasn't something I could fix through greater effort, more generosity, or better communication. The dynamic was entrenched and embraced by every family member. Accepting this truth opened the door to prioritizing my own well-being without guilt for the first time in my adult life. What about you? Have you ever had to step back from a relationship that was taking more than it gave? Did setting boundaries ultimately strengthen your connections or reveal which ones needed to end? I would love to hear your experiences in the comments. And if my story resonated with you, please subscribe for more authentic conversations about navigating complicated family dynamics. Thank you for sharing this journey with me, and remember that sometimes the quietest actions create the most powerful changes.